Paul's clarifying that he had an instance happen to him, and he is not sure as to whether or not the instance happened with someone who came from the third heaven or not. And that's important for you to understand, because some of the information that you're getting and some of the things that you're encountering in life, some of that information is coming from the third heaven. And you've got to be able to distinguish which place it's coming from. And that's important. And we're going to cover that importance today, because once it comes from the third heaven and it enters into this realm where we're at, it then becomes usable for us. That's why the way that we pray, the way that Jesus said you're to pray, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. That information coming from heaven is designed to give you a taste of the third heaven here where we exist in the first heaven. You got to understand that. See, that's why people struggle with divine healing. That's information coming from the third heaven. And you got to know how to grasp it here in the first heaven in order to receive that. That's why Jesus would ask, do you believe I can do this? Do you believe I can do this? I can do it. That's not the question. The question is, do you believe I can do this? Because if you don't believe that I can do it, I'm not free to do it. Not in this realm. Now, where I live, that's all we live by. That's what Jesus is saying. He's saying where I reside, that's all we function by. But when we're here, he's saying, I got to have you to believe that I can do this in order to give me the freedom to do this here in this realm. Because this is a different realm than where I live. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Now watch. Go back to Genesis 1. Genesis 1, verses 6 through 8. Genesis 1, verses 6 through 8 says this. Genesis 1, 6 through 8 says, and God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. Okay, understand this because I want you to see how this makes sense. One of the things, excuse me, one of the things that in science class, and I still remember in third grade, seeing the teacher put the picture up on the board as to how evaporation works. I know, I took a turn. But evaporation, when you think, when rain falls, the cycle that it works, as rain falls, it comes here to the earth, then it goes back into the heavens, back into the clouds by evaporation. So you don't see it, but moisture is consistently shifting. It's consistently going back in a different form in the way that it came down. Okay? So in understanding that, raindrops fall. But there's moisture continually going back to heaven that we don't get to see like we saw the raindrops. Okay? And I know what you're thinking. What in the world does that have to do with heaven? Because look there in verse 7. It says, and God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. So there is a translation that has to happen between waters. All right? That's crucial. Because that translation is what's going to make the difference as to whether or not it's received from one place to the other. Now, you say, what's that got to do with me in heaven? Because if you don't know how to talk heaven's language, heaven can't respond for you. If you don't know the words to speak or to be able to embrace the spirit by which to release the words that you don't know how to speak, one of the two. Because I'm not going to tell you, you can't hear from heaven if you can't speak in tongues, because that's a lie. Okay? And anybody, I don't care Pentecostal, I don't care who you are, you can't play that game with me, because I know what this book tells me, and there were some folk that didn't know how to speak in tongues that were still hearing from heaven. So don't put that as one of the criteria as to whether or not you can hear from heaven. All right? Now, let me get back into my message. That bothers me sometimes. Because you got to understand, he's saying there's a division of these waters. These up top function different than the ones underneath. Okay? So you got to know that there's a difference. There is a way that you can handle things whenever you're not in the third heaven's presence. But when you're in the third heaven's presence, remember Moses, whenever Moses had to approach God in the mount, what did God tell him? Get your shoes off. Now I know you are down in a realm that you're used to, but there is a presence here this time. And with that presence being here this time, I need your reverence for this presence. So you take your shoes off when you come to this place in this way, so that I don't have to strike you down. Because this is holy. That this is from above. This is waters from above. And you got to be able to tell the difference. Because that's crucial. Now watch. Look at verse 8. It says, and God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. All right. The first and the lowest level of heaven exists here in the earth, and that includes the air that we breathe. Okay. If you take all of the oxygen out of the air here in the earth, guess what? Ain't no humans living. It's not going to function like that. All right. Now notice this. I want you to go to Deuteronomy chapter 11. Keep your place in Genesis 1, or you don't have to. That's the very front of the Bible. Hopefully you can find that. But in Deuteronomy chapter 11, and verse 16 through 21 begins to explain something about this first heaven. Deuteronomy chapter 11. Beginning at verse 16 down through 21 says this. It says, take heed to yourselves that your heart be not deceived, and you turn aside and serve other gods and worship them, and then the Lord's wrath be kindled against you, and he shut up the heaven, that there be no rain, and that the land yield not her fruit, and lest you perish quickly from off the good land which the Lord giveth you. Therefore shall you lay up these my words in your heart and in your soul, and bind them for a sign upon your hand, that they may be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall teach them your children, speaking of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt write them upon the doorposts of thine house and upon thy gates, that your days may be multiplied, and the days of your children in the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers to give them, as the days of what? Heaven upon the earth. So notice, one of the first things that he's telling them, take heed to yourselves that your heart be not deceived, and you turn aside and serve other gods and worship them. Okay? Then he goes on and begins to address them about their words. Notice, he's addressing them about their words. I thought we was talking about heaven. But he's addressing about words. He's saying, here's what you need to do. Lay up these my words in your heart and in your soul. Now we're talking about heaven. And for some of you that